Evening. Buyer's remorse. Buy a new car? I'll be moving in. Let's get started.
Sorry, I think there's been a mistake. I bought it from Carvana.
You what?
Yeah, great price. I even have 7 days to love it or return it.
So there's no...
No buyer's remorse. More like buyer's rejoice.
I guess I'll let myself out. Congratulations. I mean it.
Buyer's rejoice. Buy your car today on Carvana.
Limitations and exclusions may apply. See our 7-day return policy at Carvana.com.
An animal that runs as fast as a greyhound that's been clocked at over 45 miles per hour, and they have a hunting success rate of, get this, 70 to 90%. In comparison, lions, and I didn't know this by the way, only have a success rate of roughly 25%. In today's episode, Dr. Greg Rasmussen joins me. He's one of the most remarkable figures in African wildlife conservation. Now, he's a man that's devoted his entire adult life to a single endangered species, the African wild dogs. Today, their preferred name is actually painted dogs, and personally, I like it way much better. Have you ever actually seen them? If you have, you know where the name comes from, and if you haven't, you need to look them up because you'll know once you see them exactly why they're called that. And by the way, the name African wild dog, it's really meant to be a derogatory term. These guys, they're magnificent looking. Not one looks the same as another, and their look is as unique as our fingerprints. Greg's not only an amazing person, he's an amazing storyteller. And the story he has to tell, it's pretty cool. And he's been instrumental in saving these misunderstood animals and the many things these guys can teach us. Get this, when they hunt, they vote on it. When they catch their prey, the most vulnerable, they eat first. And each morning, they literally greet each other just to begin their day. It's not about the one, it's about the entire pack. Now, there's so much I could tell you, but let's let Greg tell you. And after his story, let's try and be more like painted dogs. They could teach us all a little bit about just being a little bit better.
For real, 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 for real. Got a bunch of furry friends and I love them all the same. I'm an animal lover, veterinarian is the name. Let's share some pet stories from heartwarming to strange, losses and gains, from wacky to insane. For real. You're now tuned in to For Real with your host, Mark Kyle.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the For Real podcast. Today I've got a treat. I've got Dr. Greg Rasmussen here. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Well, for you guys that are listening, we've tried to do this numerous times with internet problems, so we're going to keep our fingers crossed that it actually goes through. So, Greg, let's, we've done before when we try to do this thing, I like to talk about you, your background, how you got to where you are today. So let's just go wherever you want to start in your journey, and let's get to Zimbabwe and talk about the painted dogs.
So I think my journey started when I was about 9 years old, when my parents emigrated to what was then Rhodesia, and today is Zimbabwe, of course.
Right.
And coming from England to an area where there was wildlife and nature, my father was teaching in a remote school, and so therefore I was basically, the bush was my back garden.
That's awesome.
And as a kid, I always loved, in England, I used to love fishing, mainly just to see all the nature by the rivers. And I was a crab fisherman, but I just enjoyed being out there. So to come to Africa was like a dream come true. And as I grew up, I took a passion in snakes, in fact, reptiles. I was a herpetologist. And I managed to break the door down to the Natural History Museum to get a curator to take me under wing. And I was only about 10 years old, and he'd let me into the museum. I spent my whole school holidays there. So I formed a very strong bond with nature and fieldwork. So at a young age, I was assisting the curator, Dr. Broadley, who's late now, but he was one of the founding herpetologists for Africa. And he would treat me like an adult and teach me whatever he could. So I had a great foundation. And I never realized that what I thought was a hobby was a passion that never went away.
That's awesome, though.
So I joined the British Merchant Navy, and then after 7 or 8 years, out of the blue, I was life was okay, but I was like, what am I going to do next? I'm not going to do this my whole life. And it hadn't struck me. And then a letter came from the museum in Zimbabwe saying, Greg, do you want to help on a field trip? And I said, and they said, we can't pay you anything. We can provide you somewhere that you can stay at my house. Well, obviously, when you're in the field, well, there'll be food and transport to the field, etc. But are you game to help us out for a few months? And I just suddenly realized that's it. That's me. And so I broke back into working, helping out at the museum voluntarily. Funded my last few $1,000s. I bought an air ticket, and that was me. And then while I was in the field helping an ornithological group, I joined curator of ornithology. Came to the museum one day, and he said, "Greg, you're going to come on a field trip." And of course, you say the word field trip to me, I'm like, "Yes, when?" He said, "Tomorrow morning, 5:00." I said, "I'm there." He said, "We've got one person dropped out." He said, "There's one space in the vehicle." So I assumed I was going to do reptile field work. But of course, I didn't realize I was with a bunch of ornithologists, and they were different MOUs. Bird guys get up at 5:00 in the morning or before, hear one bird call, and they're off. And reptile guys, you wait until it's all warmed up a bit, and start relaxed, having tea, your coffee. And it was actually on this field trip that my game changed from working with reptiles to working with painted dogs. And the only way I could collect data was to sit on the hood of the Land Rover. But we were away for it was a 6-week survey, so my backside was a bit tougher in those days. And so I'd hang on for grim death onto the hood of the Land Rover when they were driving in the bush. And suddenly they stopped the car, and I assumed they stopped the car to see they'd seen a lizard or something, because that was the deal. So I jumped off the car, looking for a lizard that wasn't there, and I'm going, "Where's the lizard?" And the curator of ornithology stuck his head out the window and said, "Greg, get in the car." And I said, "Where's the lizard?" He said, "Get in the car." I said, "Where's the lizard?" He said, "Get in the car, there's lions on the side of the road." But when he said lions, of course I got in the car. And so the lions were very bemused by the whole thing. Anyway, so when the trip got back, it's funny how life takes you on a curved ball thrown at you, and it takes you on another path in your life trajectory. And the story carried with me, where the curatorial team said, "Oh, how's the filter?" "Oh, well, there was Greg, of course. He nearly got eaten by lions." Stupid idiot looking for lizards couldn't see that there was a whole pride of lions on the side of the road, and we'd stopped to look at the lions. And they were having coffee, and there's a young, recently finished PhD graduate said, "Who is this guy, Greg?" He said, "I desperately need a local field assistant to run and collect data on the painted dog."
No, he thought you were the crazy guy that didn't know there were lions. He goes, "I want that guy."
And he said, "Has he got field experience?" And he said, "I'm desperate for someone with field experience." They said, "Well, Greg's got field experience coming out of, all his life he's been doing field work from a very early age. So yes, he's field competent and he's a biologist, he's trained." Because when I went back to Zimbabwe, I did another couple of degrees, one in zoology and one in botany, because I'd done one with university didn't qualify me as a biologist. With my degree with the British Merchant Navy didn't qualify me to be a biologist. So I went back to university, but I was doing it for love, not a piece of paper.
Right, of course.
And anyway, so the guy, he said, "How do I get hold of, where is Greg?" He said, they said, "Oh, he's gone off in disgust into the field because he didn't collect much data on the Wangi field trip because the timing was all up the pole." So he said, "Well, how do I contact him?" They said, "Good luck." He said, "He's gone to the field maybe 6 weeks, 2 months, And I used to disappear for 1 or 2 months on my own, quite happy doing my field work. And so finally, after about 2 months, I get back to the museum, and the phone rings. This guy, Josh Ginsberg, says, Greg, he said, "Are you Greg?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Will you help me do field work on the painted dog," or what they were calling then the wild dog.
Right.
And I said, "No, you got the wrong guy." I said, "I work with reptiles." He said, "But you can work with anything, right?" I said, "Yes." I said, "But I've got a post offered to me in Tanzania working with reptiles." He said, "When's that's going to happen?" I said, "Maybe 6 months." He said, "Help me for 6 months." And after the second I started working with the dogs, it was a game changer for me, because Josh showed me the dogs, showed me there was one had a radio collar on, and he said, "There's the dogs. This is how the radio. Good luck, collect data. Here's some ideas about data collection." Bruce said, "But obviously, if you have any ideas of your own, go for it." And I suddenly realized that here was the species that I'd read everything we could to know about them, but there was very little known. They were labeled putative cattle killers.
Right.
They were labeled as dogs of hell. And I suddenly realized that here was a species going extinct right in front of my own eyes. And I thought I was a fairly informed young biologist, and I had no idea. In the country I grew up, there was not like some underground worm going extinct. Right in front of my nose, there was a species going extinct. And the first pack of dogs I got to know for 5 minutes, there were 24 dogs and 20 were slaughtered by ranchers.
Oh, wow.
Then I had an alpha male killed by a car, and the pack collapsed basically because they had to disband because there was no breeding male, and then most of the pups didn't survive. Anyway, so the more I studied my working with the dogs used to be quite unique. Wherever they went, I would go, and wherever they slept, I would sleep as close as I could, but not too close, because I didn't know because my mum had made the comment to me, and she said, "Greg," I said, "Oh, Mum, I'm going to stop working with snakes. I'm going to work with wild dogs." She said, "Oh, good." She said, "Leave those cobras and mambas and puff adders alone."
And the black mambas.
And then because that's what I used to deal with a lot.
Right.
I mean, to me, it was fair game chasing a black mamba down. I wouldn't do it today. Sometimes we do things when we're young. We think, what was I thinking? Clearly, I wasn't.
You were young.
And young and dumb. Or maybe not so dumb because I'm still alive.
Well, I'm going to say I was young and dumb, and I'm old and dumb now. So I'm right there.
So Mum then reads a book called Wild Dogs Running, and it was talking about dogs, pack of painted dogs, chasing a rider on a horse down and killing the horse, and the guy escaping with his life. Mum reads this like it was real truth. Of course, it was just pure bloody fiction.
Of course.
And so she writes to me and she says, "Greg, why don't you go back to working with snakes? I've just read this."
Mom.
And of course I write, "Dear Mum," and I write back and said, no, they're quite harmless. They're fine. They just kill what they want to eat. I said, I can't find any record of them attacking human beings. And I hadn't, and I couldn't find one in any literature I searched, any grey literature, hunters' tales. Farmers used to say to me, "Oh, they chased me." And I said, "Look at this farmer who probably couldn't run more than you couldn't climb a tree."
Yeah.
And he said, "Yeah, I escaped up the tree." And I'm like, "Yeah, right, bullshit."
Yeah.
And when you know the speed of dog, you can't outrun a dog anyway.
Right.
So on one of my forays working with the dogs, I used to have a radio collar on the dog, and I used to keep the headphones. I'd sleep with them on. So all night I'd be hearing this psh, bing, bing, beep, beep. But the thing is, there was a trick to the collar. That every time the dog woke up and started moving, the collar beep would go faster.
Oh,
Then that would act like a baby alarm for me. So one morning, about 5 o'clock, I had to change my time schedule working with dogs, so they get up really early. So I'd be working with the bird guides again. The signal changed. So the first thing I do is I get out of bed early in the morning when I hear the signal change and go to the bathroom or the restroom. So I got to, and I thought the dogs were maybe a couple of 100, 300, 400 yards away because the signal was quite weak. So to my surprise, I was just sitting, squatting with my trousers down by my ankles, and the whole pack of dogs appeared. Well, believe me, trust me, you can't run away in that position. You can try. And they came closer and closer, and all I could do was squat. And they surrounded me, the whole pack, 11 dogs. And they looked, they just kind of bowed their heads, and they looked at me, and they came close, and they edged forward, and I'm like, well, Mum, we're going to find out now, because my arse was completely bare. And so I think the smell, I added a bit to my pile, and the smell drove them away. And then I realized there were no threat to human beings. They were just curious.
right.
I didn't shout, I didn't wave at them and go, yeah, I just stood there like, okay, come on, what's going to happen? And they came close. And of course I was pumping, my heart was pounding a bit. Then I realized there was no threat to human beings. And I wrote to Mum, said, dear Mum. But then I had a very defining moment, because every time when I spoke to, they would say, oh, they're like piranhas on legs and doing the work of the devil. The ranchers would tell me they're devil's dogs and all, bringing religion into it. And everyone was, they were slaughtered by the ranchers on site. The second they left the national park, they were shot for being cattle killers. And even the public hated them. Public who'd never seen them, knew nothing about them that was true, had just read all the BS. And had an incident that was game-changing. It was a dog called Circus. And it was my first study pack. And there was an interaction with dogs and a lion, the pack and a lion, at around 6 o'clock at night, just so I could just see what was going on. Well, I heard this interaction. I could hear a dog had been mauled. By the time I got my vehicle in, there was a dog lying on the ground, couldn't lift his head. I stopped the vehicle, checked around, the lion wasn't there. Walked as close as I walked up to the dog, and his eyes were grey. He didn't even flinch, didn't even move. So I backed off immediately. I can't help him. I'm not going to help anything by picking him up or anything. Just stress him out and kill him. So I radioed a vet, drove a few hours, radioed a vet and said, what can we do? And he said, well, what can we do? He said, it's dark now. I said, there's nothing I can do now. He said, the best I can offer you, he said, go back at 5 o'clock, go back at first light. And if the dog is still there and breathing, he said, I'll come and see if there's anything we can do, or at least. Because obviously there is a case in the wild, if an animal is definitely going to die, then their euthanasia should always be an option.
Sure.
Anyway, so I got back 5 o'clock the next morning. I walk in to the spot, and there was a drag mark. The dog had been dragged away. The carcass had been dragged away. So I assumed in the night, while I was radioing vets and everything else, the hyenas or the lion itself had dragged the carcass somewhere. The pack already had moved on. They were about 5 to 8 miles away. And I realized when I caught up with the pack, there was only 10 dogs, not 11. So I kind of knew something had gone amiss. So I assumed he was dead. I mean, he was good, looked as good dead to me. He'd been mauled, grabbed by the neck and mauled, given a good mauling from the neck, from the side of the. I figured maybe he had a trachea punctured, and continued to follow the pack. Then about a few days later, I'm staying with the pack. They're nowhere near the site. because dogs move 8 to 10 miles every day, very common. Every day they move somewhere different. And a dog called Circus disappeared. 10 o'clock in the morning, when they hunt, they play, they go to sleep. Suddenly Circus would stand up and go somewhere. And I'm like, where are you going? And then 2 days later, he did the same again, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 9:30, gone. So after about a week of this, I just couldn't take it anymore. And I got a tracker, because to track on foot, because he didn't have a collar, you need 2 people. And so I got paid a tracker to come in and help me track. And I tracked, and I couldn't believe my eyes. We got to a point about 8 or 9 miles away. And when I realized where I was back where the dog had been mauled, close to. And Circus Olner was in a thicket, close to where he'd been mauled. So what had happened was the pack had dragged him away into safety. And Circus was going back every other day or every day to feed him and clean his wounds. He was a savage, aggressive killer. No, here was a dog. And I've seen it subsequently. They're the one species that looks after their sick, they're weak, they're old. They don't put themselves first, they put the other pack members first. And the social system is as perfect as we can.
And we'll be right back. If you own a cat or you're thinking of getting a cat, well, you know what I mean. Cats are really cool. And my cat, Lily, well, she's beyond cool. And the more I talk to people, the more I'm finding out that there's a cat movement going on out there. These days, everybody seems to be a cat person. If you know, you know. But that litter box, have you heard of the whisker litter robot? I promise you, it's a game changer. It automatically cycles after every use, so you're not having to scoop, so no more of that stinky smell. Plus, their cool whisker app, it actually gives you real-time notifications to let you know what is really going on. It's a royal treatment for both you and your cat. The time saved, the holding your nose effort of scooping and cleaning, it's just no longer needed. Let me tell you, the future, it's feline. I'm just saying. But learn more about whisker litter robot models and starter kits today and take an additional $50 off bundles with code FORREAL. That's an additional $50 off bundles with code FORREAL at whisker.com/forreal.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at PrepVet.com. Save 10% with promo code FurRealPodcast, covered by most pet insurance.
I want to kind of go back a little bit and then talk about some of your characteristics. Now, when you got involved, based on when I was doing my homework, at one point there were about a half a million wild dogs, or painted dogs is what you were calling them now. But when you get involved, they were way down to hardly any, right? So what were the numbers?
Yes, so the numbers, turn of the century, there was probably 500,000 to 1 million painted dogs in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
In all habitats except true deserts and true rainforests. They were even inhabiting the equatorial swamp forests, and Africa is a big continent. There were a lot of dogs. When I started in Zimbabwe, there were less than 200.
200 dogs total?
In the country.
Wow.
And during the persecution period, there was a period they were put on bounty starting in 1905 in Zimbabwe. There was one 5-year period where over 3,000 dogs were shot. So more dogs were shot in Zimbabwe in one 5-year period than occurred in the whole country.
So, and let's talk a little bit about that. For you guys that are listening, if you don't know it, when you're talking about the cattle industry, not only is that food for a family, but it's money. And so what they were doing, and you debunked that. So they were blaming the dogs for when they were losing cattle, but in essence, what you were able to debunk, can you talk a little bit about that? Because it's like everything else. Money dictates how some of the world runs. It's unfortunate.
The whole thing was the ranchers were the major killers of the dogs.
Right.
That was the prime cause of death. And I mean, if pack left the national park, within a week, all the ranchers would form posses, and they'd go hunt them down one by one until there were none left, until the pack was so ineffective it couldn't function. And so I started going to the ranchers' meetings, and I didn't go as a let me go and say my bit and bugger off. I spent all day at the ranch at the farmers' meeting, sit there listening to them, all their challenges, to understand who they were more. And of course, because my question was, why are you killing the dogs? Well, because they're cattle killers. My grandfather, and they used to kill all my grandfather's cows, and we lost so many cows. And then some people actually did tell me that they used to make a living out of the bounty scheme, where they were paid so much a pelt. So like coyotes, they get money out of killing them. So it was good for business. Anyway, so I said, well, I need to study them in the ranch land. I said, this is key. They said, we can tell you they're killing lots of cows, and if we let them in, I didn't say I don't believe you. I just said, you've got your side of the coin. I need to see it for myself. I said, if I can see that this animal is a putative cow, I'm going to be your best friend to try and help you. If I know your problem, then they said, oh, but we can tell you the data. I said, no, I need to understand the data for myself. So I got brokered a very important deal, and I made a deal with the ranchers. Because conservation has to be about it's a two-sided handshake, isn't it? It's not, I want this. It's not for me. Yes, I want dogs conserved. So I said to the ranchers, I want to study the dogs for 3 years. I want to get numbers. I want to get real data on the dogs, what they're killing, what are the circumstances of the deaths, so I can better understand the problem. And I said, and at the end of that 3 years, I promise faithfully I will move the whole pack. And they said, well, what if they start killing large amounts of livestock? I said, well, then I'll know, and we'll go back to the drawing board. I said, but ideally I need 3 years to collect a solid data set. Well, I didn't tell them at that time. I had no idea how to catch a pack of dogs, so they don't come for a bag of kibble.
So you're a salesperson.
And it took me 3 years to learn how to catch a whole pack, and we were practicing on what I would call tame dogs, because the dogs in farmland really were wily. I mean, they were sharp, they were alert, they were a product of natural selection. They were like the last wolf in the U.S. trappers were trying to get, and they couldn't get. There were some wolves they never trapped, and there was one particular dog in that mush, was called him Bigfoot, and he'd even changed the behavior of all the dogs in the pack. So at the end of the day, the end of the 3 years came quite quickly, and I'd got very solid data on what the damage by the dogs was, and I'd categorized everything according to money. Now, what was the value of the stock that the dogs had taken versus the value of all your other losses? It turned out that the dogs were responsible, for 1.7% of the rancher's losses.
1.7%.
Hyenas were 1.7%. Leopards were 1.7%. Plastic bags, baler twine, and the one silly cow, cattle swallowing rubbish killed 17%.
Of course.
So 10 times. And that was the single biggest loss. And so when I got to that, I managed to publish it in the Farmers Monthly, which is there. And I got the full centre spread and I laid it out there. At that point, the ranchers admitted to me, they said, well, we knew that they were not killing very much, but we don't like them. I said, well, now we have the problem. The problem is prejudice. You know, we have racial prejudice, we have prejudice as prejudice. It was prejudice against the species. And anyway, so I did move the pack, which gained a lot of support from the ranching community. But the general public realized that the ranchers hadn't been telling the truth about stock losses. Because data speaks volumes, real numbers rather than hearsay and opinion. And the public started to give me support. And I used to do a radio program every month. There was a wonderful radio presenter who used to had wildlife Zimbabwe, and every month he'd have a program, and I would feature every month or every other month, and I would tell the public the truth about the dogs. And I made it a point that I was never going to tell anybody anything unless I'd actually seen it myself to be fact. So when I told the story of circus, I would share about the roadkill that was an emerging problem, because as the dogs started to expand their territories outside the national park into the highway areas, they were getting mowed down, sometimes deliberately, sometimes not, but a lot of times deliberately. And the ranchers, it took me 13 years to work with the ranchers. And at the end of those years, there were ranchers that I'd see. I'd always look in the ranching community. I'd look for who's the leader. They follow someone. They've got their own pack leader, and it's not always the biggest mouth. They also, as a community, they know which of them's got the most smarts.
Right.
And that would be the guy I'd work with, and I would translate with him, and he would translate back. And so, and I had some instances with the ranchers. I mean, it wasn't all talking and honey and talk. They had me at gunpoint on at least 2 occasions.
I'm sure they didn't like you.
No, they didn't. They tried to block me from going on their farmland. And sometimes I would make it deliberate that I wasn't going to give up. And so on one particular occasion, I encountered a pack of dogs that went on this rancher's ranch. And when they left, they were skittish, and there were 4 missing. And I'm like, the 4 were different sexes. It wasn't like there'd been a mass dispersal. So I realized that they'd been shot, and the guy was kind of known by the ranchers as an unreasonable hatred of all predators. And so I wasn't thinking, again, like catching black mambas, I go straight to the devil's door. And I open his gate and I drive in boldly without even thinking what the hell was going to be the consequence. And out comes a rancher with a gun, double-barrel shotgun. What are you doing on my property? And I'm just, my brain and my mouth weren't working at quite the same speed. My mouth was talking faster than my brain was thinking seriously how. And so I said, you shot some dogs. And I said, and I want the carcasses back. I haven't shot any effing dogs. You get off my property. Copious quantities. Blasphemy. And at which point he got the double-barrel shotgun down, popped 2 rounds in, clicked it shut, and he came straight to the windscreen. He said, you better get out now, he said, otherwise I'm going to blow you away. And I'm suddenly realizing that maybe my mouth had been a little bit too big for its boots. And I'm trying to think, how do you diffuse the situation? So instead of trying to say, yes, I'm going to put it in reverse, my mind still wasn't working quick enough. So I said, look, I know you shot dogs. I said, we can do this the easy way and the hard way, or the hard way. And I'm suddenly thinking, mine, backtrack, back. As I said that, I thought, you idiot, you complete fool. Now you are going to get it, both barrels through the windscreen. And he looked at me in absolute disbelief. He couldn't believe what I just said to him. He said, are you threatening me? Because, I mean, he was an older guy and I was a younger guy. And I said, I'm trying to back. I said, no. I said, there is an easy way. And he said, okay, funny guy. He said, what's the easy way? I said, no. He said, what's the hard way? And I said, the hard way, as I said, is that we go into your house. And at which point he looked at me. He said, what, you think I'd leave the smelly dog carcasses in my house? I said, no. I said, we won't go in your house looking for dogs. And now he's a bit perplexed. He said, well, what do you mean? I said, we're going to go into your gun cabinets. Because I knew that every rancher, and everyone's got a firearm, half of them are not registered. They'd talk in the farmers' meeting about how many guns they had that weren't registered, how many rounds of ammunition they had that weren't counted. And let's face it, that's quite a common thing.
Sure.
Not always for legal reasons. I said, we'll come with the police and parks. And we'll count your
weapons.
Then I said, and then we'll go into your drugstore room. He said, I don't keep the dogs in the drugstore. And now he was like, where's this guy taking this conversation? And I said, see, when DDT got banned and various chemicals got banned in the US, they dumped them all on countries in Africa. So the sales reps for all the very nasty chemicals that should never be used, they'd go to these farmers and say, look, we've got a special deal on cyanide this month, Yeah. Another special deal on DDT. And they bought it up in the stack load. So I knew they had all these illegal chemicals. I said, then we'll go into your storerooms. And then he said, what's the easy way? I said, you just tell me where the dogs are. I'll pick up the carcasses and I won't tell the authorities. And he said, I shot the dogs. And he took me to the carcasses.
Yeah.
We dug them up. And that was quite interesting because he was chair of the cattle section of the Farmers Union. And the farmers they weren't angry with him for shooting dogs. They were angry that I'd outsmarted him.
Well, here's the cool thing about this. I mean, because this would have been, I'm guessing, in the 80s or the 90s, because what I read, that the last dog shot in Zimbabwe was 2002 or 2003, correct? That you're aware of.
The last dog shot, I started in 88. They were all being shot up in the 80s, the 90s. And in the year 2000, the last dog was shot.
2000.
Yeah.
Okay.
And basically, I'd finished my study on how many cattle dogs were eating, and that in itself was an interesting take. Because the ranchers I used to tell the ranchers, they say, you'll never catch us shooting a dog. And I say, one day I will. I need that once. And sure enough, in 2000, the one day came. Because on my collars, because sometimes I didn't even put transmitters, but if I collared down, I'd put a belt that said National Parks, endangered species reward if found. But no one knew that was written on the collars. And I'd even written satellite, blah, 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 which of course in those days, that was a load of BS. But
it was smart.
Well, I got the tip from a bear researcher who was sick and tired of having his collars burnt. And so what did he do? He put an on-off switch and he found the collar unburned with the on-off switch switched off. And so, of course, when one of the workers saw the collar and was asked to bury it, burn it and bury it. And he looked at it and he said, hold on a minute, this thing's worth a bob or two, worth some money. So he contacted the phone number. It was going straight to National Park. So I've got this collar, came off a dead dog. What's the reward? They said there will be a reward. So obviously we paid him, and then the guy was a court case ensued. It took 2 years for me to get the prosecution together. I led my own defense, took a civil case, and in the meantime, though, we'd got the dogs moved from being vermin on the parks list to specially protected. And the guy got given, because I said to the district prosecutor, I said, what if you agree? I said, what's the penalty? He said he couldn't go to prison. And I said, well, not that I felt it was too harsh. It wasn't going to do conservation any good. I said, make it clear that he gets a prison sentence, but there is a payout instead of going to prison. So basically, the guy got sentenced to 6 months in prison, which was rescinded on paying a substantial fine. And then, of course, it wasn't like me, your brother's gone to jail because of me. And an African prison, no prison, I'm sure, is a picnic. But for a European to be in an African prison in Zimbabwe was not going to be fun.
No, it could be a good time.
And so basically, I think because we showed understanding of the situation, that was the last dog that everyone put the guns down. I mean, bottom line, it validated what we knew was true, was that they were not killing so much stock that they were eating them out of house and home. And let's face it, if I was a cattle rancher and I was genuinely losing tens of thousands of dollars, I'd say to hell with the law. I pay, but they weren't. So they weren't. You wouldn't go to prison for prejudice. You go to prison for significant financial loss.
So a couple things. One is so when you were getting involved, there were around 200. Today, there's over 5,000 or 6,000, right?
But in Zimbabwe, there's about eight or 900.
Okay, but overall, there's now 6,600 or something like that. Is that right?
6,000 something in Africa. They're still in a bad way.
But still, I mean, what you've done is because by the way, we haven't even talked about your organization, but before we get to your organization, I'm going to talk about specifically the characteristics of the painted dog, how fast they are. You know, I love the sneezing thing, the hunting, and everything else about it. For anybody first of all, for anybody that's listening, if you've never seen a painted dog, of course I'll have it on social media, but really look into it. They're the most gorgeous animals in the world. But let's talk about characteristics and all the other things about them if you don't know what they are.
So the first thing I noticed about obviously they live in packs, and the minimum pack size is 6 or 8 animals to function effectively, a bit like a football team. But they have this incredible social system where there are packs have leaders. Yes, they have an alpha male and an alpha female. But you don't see the alpha male snarling at all the others and trying to bully them down. Alphas are chosen by the pups when they're pups. A litter of pups is born. There's males and females. Those pups are the ones that will choose their own future alpha as pups. So they start, and it's not just through play fighting from me as a young pup saying, I'm bigger and stronger than you, therefore, when I want to be alpha, I'm going to be the alpha. No, the pups separate into male and female groups mentally, and they're observing their emerging alpha. And I, as a human being, I can spot them. And the emerging alpha is the one that's the most curious. It's the one that sees danger and tells all the other pups, no, this is scary, we must back off, or sees something like a tortoise. And in one case, I remember with absolute amazement watching them. they found a baby goose, and they were just nuzzling it along. Initially, they were all like, "That's something to play with. No, it's something to be scared of." And the emerging alphas are the ones that show the other pups that it's safe or it's dangerous. And they're the ones, I mean, circus, classic example. I always remember, to give you an example of what an emerging alpha is, he's paying attention. So while all the other pups were goofing around, I remember there was an encounter with a lion. So when Circus's young yearling was 13 months old. And it was one of the most incredible encounters I ever saw in my whole life. And it says a lot about the dogs. I was by a den, and two dispersing females passed through the denning area, and there was dog-to-dog talk, quite high vocal. And then the females disappeared out of the equation. They'd shown the pack that they were there to probably try and attract some males. The pack wasn't interested. And that attracted 5 hyenas and a lion, male lion. And I was like, oh my God, this is going to be carnage. Because they were at the den. There was a den that I could hear what was going on. I never used to go to the den. I'd stay away from the den. But you can hear what's going on. You get better data anyway. And suddenly, out comes on the road the alpha male. Old boy he was called, a big male, about 10 years old. Came out on the road and stood there, and the pack huddled around him. And they communicate silently, all with high-pitched twitters. In this particular thing, there was almost like they were twittering among themselves. And suddenly, the 9 of the 9 left, without leaving the alpha male just standing there. And then I'm looking, I'm saying, you're going the wrong way, because there was a leopard. They were chasing a leopard up a tree. I hadn't noticed there was a third predator there. They came back all so coordinated, and they circled around, went to the alpha male again. What do we do, Chief? And that was highlighted what the role of the alpha was. And I was looking at this old dog and said, aren't you going to participate in the battle? Aren't you going to lead the charge? No, he just stood there like the general on the hill. And suddenly the next thing I see is the hyenas getting their asses kicked. I mean, let me tell you, dogs will really beat the stuffing out of hyenas. And so you hear the hyenas getting backside bit, and they all disappeared. Then they all went back to the alpha male. Now what do we do? And then I was saying, what you can do now, old boy? And then he organized the whole pack into a V, and he was at the head of it. And beside him, on his right flank, was Circus, the emerging alpha. So he got himself another alpha as his sidekick. And the two of them, they communicated how they communicated. He baited the lion until the lion went into a charge position. And the lion was like, come and get me. We're going to fight. And at some signal, just as the lion started to really get rattled up, was focused on the alpha male, Circus went round the back of the lion and bit him in the testicles. And that was coordinated, and that worked.
Yeah.
Goodbye, lion. The lion was like, I'm out of here. I'm outsmarted. And the whole thing with the dogs, was that, so, I mean, yes, they never scavenge. They eat what they kill. And the thing I noticed, we'd hear about stories about dogs doing what they call surplus killing. We just kill for the fun of it, not painted dogs. What they kill, they eat. And they don't even, a small pack doesn't even kill a big animal. Not because it can't kill a big animal. 2 dogs can take down a 250-pound animal. But they don't do it unless they've got a lot of mouths to feed and the pack can clean up. And so they're the only species where there's no fighting among themselves. There's no fighting for territory. There's no fighting for leadership. The young emerging alphas, when the young circus said to his brother, we're emigrating, we're leaving, we're going to form a new pack. His brother said, okay, let's go. I've decided you're the one that's going to lead me into success. And the same goes for the females. They when they get older, 18 months to 2 years, they leave the pack to form new packs, and the four sisters will go with an emerging female.
You know, one of the things that I read that I just really appreciate about them is that when they go hunting, and I want to get into how, you know, I think they're the most successful hunter, but we'll get there in a second. Is that when they do hunt and they get food, the youngest, the weakest, the females get the food first versus the dominant one, because they're really good about taking care of each other. That's amazing.
They share the food absolutely equitably, but yes, if there's an old dog that needs to be fed, he gets fed first. The pups feed first, unlike lions. So, and then they share everything right across the board. There's only one dog we think gets more, is the alpha female, but not because she fights for it. They don't. I mean, you can have 16 dogs at a carcass. There's not one snarl. They work as a team. This is where in 5 minutes they've stripped anything worth having off that carcass. I remember seeing a 200-pound animal being pulled down, and I was there watching it go down, and I drove up, and there were 16 dogs on a large water buck, and they were stripping away. And I was there as a young biologist. I'm just counting how many seconds has passed. And when I got to 5 minutes, suddenly a lioness appeared, and the dogs backed off the carcass because they won't risk their pups. And I was amazed. There was nothing left. And this lion walked up to the carcass and looked at it. I've just come all this way, run here for 5 minutes. I heard a kill. There's no food left whatsoever.
It's amazing.
And then they do, that's cooperation. I mean, you even watch it sometimes where one dog will hold a leg and the other dog will snip it off. Then they'll collectively, they work as a team to pull it so that they get maximized, like a football team of butchers.
Yeah, you know, I don't know of any animal that I've ever read that works as well. I know that, you know, lions hunt together and stuff like that, but they really work as well as a team that way, like a democracy kind of a thing. I don't.
They never work lions never work as a team when it comes to dinner time.
Oh, really?
You know, the pride male takes his share and tells everyone to get lost till I've had what I want.
Right.
Cubs are often last in the pile. No, I mean, but the teamwork's their strength. You know, I mean, that's why they're such efficient hunters.
For real, for real, for real, for real, for real, for real, for real.
And we'll be right back.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? PrEP Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover PrEP Therapy today at PrepVet.com. Save 10% with promo code FurRealPodcast, covered by most pet insurance.
Let's talk about the efficient hunters, because how fast they are. You know, everybody's assumed lions are so efficient, which they're not, based on what I read.
They're not.
So talk a little bit about that, how fast they are and what they really do. Their endurance is also amazing too.
I mean, I've seen chases over 2 or 3 miles, and they can be long chases, and but the main strategy is they really like dense bush. But sometimes they get caught and they have to run an animal down, but that's not the norm. But there are 2 reasons for their success. One is they choose very carefully. So they don't just say, oh, look, there's an animal, let's go have a shot at it. They'll assess very carefully how fast they can get across the ground. They're almost like I always say, I did my PhD and I did the energetics calculations. It was almost like they'd look at the thing and put the calculator on saying, energy spent to catch this sucker, energy gained when we get it, abort, or go for it. And the other thing is so part of their success rate is teamwork. And they don't run it down until it's tired. They make sure that they flank it. We even know now that they can predict where they're telling each other on the fly which direction the animal's going. They're cutting it off at the pass, so to speak. So they're predicting where the animal's going to go rather than I'm just chasing you wherever I see you go.
They're hurting it.
And then the other thing, they'll use fences if they have to from time to time. They're quite smart about that. Prey also get to know when there's a safari camp or something. But then the other thing is I found out when I did the energetics, it was quite clear to me what was going on. They have what I called an all or nothing strategy. They'll start chasing something. Let's say they chase it and then they realize that they've broken the bank. They spend more energy chasing it than they're going to get back by eating it. But they push on if they can, because they'll have lost 6,000 joules of energy, 6,000 calories of energy. And I'm going to get 4 back. I've only lost 2 rather than lose it. And animals do the fine tuning of animal behaviors. When you put the numbers against it, it's clear as day what's going on. And then, so the situation is that the social system is that and this is how they never fight. They don't fight for leadership because, hey, I chose my brother to be the leader, and I'm happy with that decision. And I as his brother, get full rights to be with the pups, and I'm passing on. I'm like the big uncle. I'm passing on my genes by supporting my brother. It's not like I have to be the breeder. But the other thing is how is it as a species that there's no fighting? I remember saying to a bunch of kids the last time I was in the US, can you imagine any of you going for a month or a week where not one of you has an argument? All the kids looked at each other and said, nah. Of course, we're fighting, we're arguing all the time about something. And the painting dogs, what they do is they do have a system which I called, ended up preemptive conflict resolution. We all know there's a theory body about conflict resolution, which starts with you and I have a punch up. Then if we're lucky, we go through a phase of appeasement, and if we're lucky, we both say we're sorry and come to terms with it. Pain dogs never let it get to that stage. Every single day, when a pack wakes up, every single dog greets every other dog. So they're even talking about it now in human relations, building up relationship credits. They're saying that when you get up in the morning, you've got a partner, say, good morning, how are you? Would you like a cup of tea? Would you like a cup of coffee? If you have a good night's sleep, whatever. Building up relationship credits. Because then basically when you do screw up later on in the day or the week or the month, you're more likely to be forgiven. And that's how the dogs do it. Every day, every single dog greets every other dog. So if there's 20 dogs, the number of greetings is 20 plus 19 plus 18 plus 17 plus 16, because that dog doesn't say, hello, everybody, my name's, how are you? So by doing that 4 or 5, 6 times a day, they're building these emotional credits. And we have what we call dog heaps. When they sleep, looks ridiculous. They sleep in these piles.
Really?
You think the dog at the bottom must be the most hot and horrible, and he's probably thinking, and they lie and they're constantly in contact, spooning each other, touching each other, so the dog won't just be lying there. They make constant contact with each other. So they're very unique.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like that old saying, kindness begets kindness.
Yeah, and it does, and that's where they have the upper edge on most other species. I mean, can you imagine a world where there's no fighting for political leadership? There isn't one in the world.
Well, not here in the U.S. I'll tell you that much.
Nowhere in the world. you know, they've got the perfect society where the right dog for the job is chosen, and he's the one that's going to take them forward.
I'd love to find the right dog for the job here in the U.S. or anywhere in the world. I'd love to find that right dog someday.
Yeah, one that has the world at heart.
Right, exactly. And
Painted dog packs
yeah,
have the pack at heart.
I read that deal that they only have 4 toes instead of 5 toes so they can run fast.
Yeah. I mean, they're well, basically, I mean, evolutionary, they separated from the main dog line about 6 million years ago, way before wolves ever appeared on the scene. And they had 5 toes then. They were probably a little brown dog that was bandied around in small packs.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, the more successful they became by working as a team, they became better and better at running and catching prey. And so in nature, Charles Darwin always said that vestiges never last. Evolution always stubs them out. The fifth the dew claw, which is the 5th toe, would have been a hindrance. So basically, it was bred out by natural selection. And they've got a very unique dentition, which is not the same as the other, like wolves. They've got a very special carnassial that enables them to cut bone and meat faster than wolves.
Oh, really?
They do. They can that unique. It's called a trenchant heel on the molar premolar combination, and that gave them an ecological advantage. By having that combination, it gave them an ecological advantage. And that ecological advantage was to eat your prey so damn fast that no one could ever steal it from you. Then that was the role of sociality. So, because that's painted dogs, by the way, in their stomach, they can hold 25 pounds of meat.
Wow. Because they weigh somewhere, they're like medium-sized dogs, right? So
they're about 50, 60 pounds, yeah, something like that. So they can eat almost half their body weight.
Wow.
They can eat. They can get these bloody great bellies, and they're very proud of themselves when they do. So by that's why they're so efficient. So if they can eat fast, and then of course what happens is that because they could eat fast, they were enabled to have a social free time. And that social free time enables them to start becoming even more adept at being social. A bit like us human beings, when fire came, we had a little more time to start communicating. That's where our language appeared.
Talk to me about their water intake. Do they drink a lot of water?
No, they don't. They're not. Essentially, whilst they do drink water, they're not water dependent.
Uh-huh. Wow.
Behaviorally, they work in the cool time of the day. They will drink if there's water available that's safe to drink at, free from crocodiles, etc. But they're not obligate. So when people used to waterhole counts in the park, they see dogs maybe once or none during the whole water count. They get enough water from what we call metabolic water from the prey that they eat, and they've got a number of evolutionary adaptations. So they don't pant, so they don't lose water when they pant. But when they breathe, they've also got a very special structure in they call it a counter-current heat exchanger. It's called a turbine. It's basically got, as they exhale, it captures the water back when they're breathing on a big hunt.
Really? Oh, they're efficient.
So they don't waste water, and they urinate very infrequently.
So they can run 45 miles an hour. I'm thinking about this. Run 45 miles an hour. They don't need very much water. They can carry 25 pounds of meat. They work as a team. It's unbelievable. They're like the perfect machine.
They are. I mean, and their evolutionary lucky strike was that having that tooth, and those big ears. They're for cooling. So when they run, they keep those beautiful big ears. They keep them forward facing. Occasionally, they can do that. They can fold their ears, but and basically, one of my students, my graduate students, did a study, and she asked for a project. I said, "Why do pain dogs have big ears?" Because we noticed in the literature so we went into British aerospace. We got government clearance to go into secure areas where they did testing in a wind tunnel, and then we made mock-ups of a painted dog's head, and we put where the ears were. We made these ears detachable, put wet and dry Baltimore on so we could measure what was going on in cooling effect. And so when the ears were off, the shape of the skull meant that the air when they ran would go into in the ears, directed at the ears. And that was the coolest part of the skull.
Huh.
And as soon as the ears were back on again, the coolest part of the con was right on the brain case.
Huh. That's why.
And that's the part of the brain that needs to stay cool. And that's why they can continue to run and run and run, not go into lactic acid, because they're dumping heat as they're running.
Right.
And they probably don't. They probably do the same trick as camels do. They parts of the body that really matter stay cool, which is the brain. The rest of your organs can get hot, and you're not going to die. But if your brain gets hot, of course you are.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. But so before we get done, we haven't talked about the Painted Dog organization, what you do, and I love what you're doing you're building. You're using people that are from Zimbabwe to go to school, creating these people that are paying attention to the animals and all that. Can we talk a little bit about that before we?
Yeah. So Painted Dog Research. We're a small organization. We're not that but big in impact, I like to think. And first of all, we have a research wing, which is specifically looking at what is the current threats. And the current threats to painted dogs are roadkill and snaring. But roadkill is so bad on painted dogs, and it's not deliberate, it's just people drive badly as they do everywhere else. Roadkill demolishing packs before they get a chance to produce pups that live long enough to produce more packs and more pups. That's the nub of it. So we've got a camera traps over an area about the size of Delaware. So we're constantly camera trapping, collecting information on the dogs and the prey. But then research alone, then we collect data on motorists. We're currently working towards getting support from the police and national parks to slow motorists down. We realize in wildlife areas, you can't always manage wildlife. You can't tell a herd of elephants where to go. You put a fence up, the fence is down in 5 minutes, and then the poachers say, "Thank you for the wire."
Right.
We have to manage the motorists, so we're working on that. But then also, communities are very important to the survival of any species. Public opinion is driving force of either survival or extinction. If people like your animal, they'll look after it or take care or support it. And if they don't like it, they'll persecute it. And that's always been my motto. And so our local community here, and obviously it's very important that we're constantly supporting local communities when we need their support. But also we've got a bush camp for kids because obviously the next generation is what it's all about. Our younger generation has to take this world forward. Leave a legacy of people that are passionate and committed and understanding. So we have a bush camp where, in conjunction with the Jane Goodall Institute, we run 24 bush camps every year, which live in for the kids, and we fund the whole thing.
That's amazing.
We fund half, Jane Goodall Institute, Germany fund the other half. But we could run 58, 54 camps a year. We'd run as many as we could if we had the funding. And that's where we introduced kids to nature, because basically to develop that bond between nature and conservation and how animals need to survive. And not just for esoterically. We need to look after our planet so that we survive.
Exactly.
And unless we realize that our life is entwined with nature. I mean, climate change is not an accident. You know, the storms, the hurricanes, the this, that. We've beaten it up so badly. Whether we're in time to slow it down, we don't know yet. But trying to teach everybody to take a more holistic approach to nature, and just happens to be that the painted dogs are, like we call it, it's an umbrella species. Underneath the umbrella of a painted dog or habitat, there are species that need conserving. But if we can conserve the painted dog, we can conserve that habitat. So we also try to focus quite heavily on supporting women in conservation, because in Africa they're denied. A lot of the women in rural areas are not sent to school in the same way the young boys are. And so we're making a dent in supporting women in to be tomorrow's champions for conservation. So we've got a whole holistic, then of course we have a whole teaching about responsible resource uses. All our buildings are designed in such a way so that we leave the minimal footprint. In fact, as I speak today, we're designing an underground septic tank, an underground soakaway, where it won't just be a soakaway, it's going to be a home for bats as well.
Oh, that's cool.
So, use the space 2 or 3 times.
So Greg, for people that are listening, how do they find you? Can you give everybody all that? Because as you said, funding's key to everything. You can have more schools for these kids, these camps for the kids and that. How do they find you? Is there social media, anything, any kind of links that you think that would be good for anybody listening?
I mean, the best link that's got everything on it is painteddogresearch.org. And there's no spaces.
Okay, I'll have that. We're recording now, but it'll be in the description. If you're listening now, just go to the description. I'll have that in there as well. Anything else that I'm sure we could talk?
I mean, if anyone remembers this podcast and remembers my name, Greg, the first name, you don't have to remember my last name, Rasmussen, which is a mouthful. If you Google Greg and painted dog, you'll find me in a top link.
Well, I'm going to do this when we get done, just to test you on that one to see if that's for sure. Okay, so we're kind of winding up, and I don't know if I told you, Greg. I always do a silly animal joke at the end. Do you remember talking about that at all? I can't remember.
I remember you talking about how silly is it going to be.
It's like the worst joke. I have like the worst joke ever in the history of jokes today. But I'm going to give it to you and just kind of grin and bear it. But as I always say to everybody, anybody that's listening, if you've heard them before, you know how bad they are. But I always say, if you want to be on the show, you got grandkids, kids, nieces or nephews, somebody that's really into science, and you want to be on the show and tell a joke, I'll gladly have you on. If you email me at mkyleforrealpodcast.com, I'll have you on. I guarantee, like Greg, who's going to hear the worst joke he's ever, you guys will always have a better joke. We'll do that. So here's a joke, Greg, and you're not even, it's so bad, it's even worse. So why don't painted dogs use GPS?
Why don't painted dogs use GPS?
Because they're really on the pack plan.
Oh, God.
I told you. Anyways, Greg, thanks so much for being on. You know what's funny is, we again, I said this when we started, we had a really hard time. We had a big thunderstorm going on and we couldn't record. We tried like multiple times. We made it all the way through. Greg, you're a wealth of information. You're doing great things. We didn't even get into the, as I told you early on, I'm a pilot. So I would love to talk about that on here, but we covered the most important things. So, but seriously, thanks so much for taking the time. You're in Zimbabwe. It's later than it is here. And I just really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks. I'm going to stay safe.
Yeah, for sure, stay safe.
I did crash my plane and break pretty much every bone in my body, but that was in the bush for a day and a half before they found me. And you know what kept me going? That I had a purpose in life.
Exactly.
While I was lying on the ground, I got to a point where I said, do I want to live? And I looked, I said, I've had a good life. I could have switched off. I could have just done like, they say the Aborigines do. I could have just said, my time has come. I'm going to switch off. And suddenly there's something inside me said, but I've got so much more to do.
The will to live.
And if you find something you're passionate about in life, anyone listening, follow your passion, not everyone's opinion. And what Australian once said to me, opinions are like backsides. Everyone's got one and they're all different.
Right.
They're all perceived differently. But what you in your heart says, I want to do, go out there and do it. And if you fail, at least then you know that I wasn't meant to be a ballet dancer, or
I guarantee I wasn't meant to be a ballet dancer for sure.
I've got 2 left feet. Yeah. So don't let people talk you down.
Yeah. And you know what? And you've kept your passion. Anyways, for everybody else who's out there listening, this has been a treat for me, and I hopefully a treat for you guys. And really, truly, from the bottom of my heart, thanks so much for listening. For real.
That concludes this episode of For Real with your host, Mark Kyle. For previous and future episodes of For Real, listen via all major podcast streaming sites.